I was getting this beautiful gift out of the suffering of someone else, and I knew it was just
Yes.
heartbreaking for her.
Hey, Michelle. It's not Michelle, it's Lindsay. But I really like that long delay.
Yeah, I'm not Michelle.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, Carly. I feel awkward about it.
Yeah, so Michelle is taking some time away because she's trying to figure out where she's going to move. And she's also really sick with a cold. So I was like, girl, I got this. I didn't really have it. Tonight, I was like, hey, Lindsay, my girlfriend, will you record our intro outro with us? With me, just me. And so here we are. We find ourselves at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, sitting crisscross applesauce on our bed.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. How was your week?
It was fine. You weren't here the whole time.
I know I wasn't here. That's why I feel like this was like a good fit because I was house sitting, cat sitting, and yeah, so we didn't really see each other a whole ton.
Yeah, that's true.
But you went to Edmonton on Saturday.
Yes, for a figure skating competition, the
Yeah.
last one of the season.
Yeah, and how did you score?
I did, yeah, for my daughter, it was fine. She didn't score as high as she wanted to, but it was her first time in the level that she was competing in.
Yeah,
And so she's hard on herself. So
that's hard. I remember being the kid that was hard on myself. But like now as an adult, I'm like, but you did great.
yeah, I know, like the whole time in the car, I was like, but this is your first time at this level.
Yeah.
And, all those other skaters were landing their axles and you've only been working on it for 3 weeks. And that wasn't good enough. She
No.
cried like 3 times.
Yeah, because you don't know what you're talking about.
No, I'm just a loser.
Yeah.
I'm just a loser mom that loves her.
Yeah, I know you don't know about landing axle.
I actually don't. Put a hockey puck in the net.
Right. Yeah. And then this upcoming week, you're going to Kelowna
Yeah, to play hockey.
to play hockey.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I don't know, like, why do we even live together? I never see you.
Yeah. Well, there'll be a for sale sign on the house when I leave.
Oh my God. Normally, Michelle and I talk about our weeks, and I didn't have a ton going on. I didn't feel great last week. Your son had a cold, and I think that through the gift of sharing, I also experienced some of that. And that was kind of it. Just I worked, I podcasted, and
We hosted a 9-year-old's birthday party last Saturday.
yeah, that was something I never thought I would do. But it was okay.
It was fine.
We survived it. Nobody bled.
No, but I didn't know how easy it was to climb on the roof of our shed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I did have to help a kid down.
Yeah. I also didn't realize that some parents would read that invitation and think to themselves, yeah, this is like a family invite.
Yeah, I just feel like that one family did. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once they showed up and like she's a solo parent because the dad works out of town. What was she going to do with the other kid? But it was very like they showed up an hour late.
They didn't RSVP.
They did. Yeah,
But now we have a new best friend because she was so stinking sweet.
she was.
And I just wanted to like help her with her kids because they're just two rambunctious boys.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying
Yeah. Because I don't have my own kids. But I guess even with Michelle's kids, she's gone to some birthday parties where other parents stay.
I used to stay up until they were about 6
Why?
because, like, I think under the age of 6,
Like you got to wipe their butt or something?
yeah, like you can't really just leave them, and like you don't like yeah, I didn't know the parents or the parents didn't know me,
Right.
or like parents stayed at my kids' birthdays up until about grade 1.
And is that, I guess, yeah, like you just feel like then you got to be friends with them.
Yeah, which for my daughter, that actually like turned into me getting to know families in the neighborhood and the parents and the
Right.
moms, and like now she's still really great friends with them, and I trust her to go for a sleepover.
Well, and now we know Omar's mom.
We know Omar's mom and his little brother.
Shishi?
Shoo
Shoo.
shoo shoo.
Shushu was a nickname.
It was his name.
I don't know what his birth name
Yeah.
is, but Shushu.
Yeah. And their mom. Hey, bye.
Heba?
Heba.
We should clarify that next time we hang out with her.
We should. And my ex-husband, the kid's dad, was here when she first got here.
Oh, yeah.
And she wasn't quite sure what our dynamic was at all.
I think a lot of people like, I'm always with you. And
Yep.
then, yeah, you had made reference to like, oh, yeah, that was Wyatt's dad. Yeah, he was just here for a little bit.
Yeah, because he left like shortly after they arrived.
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, you guys live here together.
And I was like, we're together.
Yeah.
There's no real smooth way of saying it if somebody doesn't get it right away,
Yeah.
such as Mike the mover.
Oh.
On our,
that story?
no, but on our moving on our moving day, we hired Mike the mover. So it was Mike and his crew moving things. And then right towards the end, what did he say?
Well, he said we were like just finishing unloading the last bit. And Mike is probably like an, I don't know, 50 or 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
And he had like some 20-year-olds helping him who clearly, I think, knew what was up.
Yeah.
And he came in and he was like, oh, so are you guys sisters? But then you said, no, this is my girlfriend, but he didn't hear you.
Yes. So I had to make it more awkward.
Yeah, you were like, no, this is my lover.
Yeah.
Very aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to be chill.
I know.
Yeah. And then I think he just finished what he was doing. And
yeah, which was fun. It was fine.
Yeah. But I don't know. I guess that's it. Yeah. Update on Michelle. She has not yet found a place. This rental market is wild. I don't know, man. It's just, I said last week, we're just waiting on a Hail Mary, but we're down to 11 days before she has to move.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. It's not great. So send your thoughts and prayers. Taps to Michelle. I hope she's in bed right now, but I feel like she's just sending me TikToks, to be honest. But that's her self-care. That's like our love language. I don't think you've ever heard of this, Lindsay, but do you ever feel like in your life you can't get enough of me and Michelle talking to each other?
No.
You never feel that way? We clearly didn't plan this. I'm trying on the Patreon.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. I mean, I wish I could listen to your voices all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
is there any way that I could find more episodes anywhere else?
Yeah, it's so funny that you ask that because actually we have a Patreon.
Oh, what is that?
Which it's a subscription service. And so for as little as $5 a month, you get instant access to over 55 bonus episodes. You're never going to hear these on the main feed. We talk about everything. We talk about my crazy ex. We talk about her husband. We had you on the Patreon.
Twice.
Oh yeah, we talked about dating people who steal and being a caregiver to somebody with an illness.
Yeah.
We solved the, oh God, what's her name?
Jean-Benet Ramsey.
Yeah, we solved the Jean-Benet Ramsey, and Michelle and I solved.
It was the brother.
Yeah. Well, now nobody's going to subscribe. So if you love what we do, if you can't get enough, if you want another way of supporting us, you can go to patreon.com/I did not sign up for this and then literally sign up for it.
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't talk about it with Lindsay because she has not heard it yet, but it's a repeat guest, Amanda. We had Amanda on to talk about living with cystic fibrosis. And this week we're talking to her about her 2 different types of adoption that she did.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, yeah, you don't even know. You haven't even heard it.
Well, I'll listen to it on my way to work tomorrow.
Oh my God. Cute. Okay. All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, Amanda.
Hi, Carleen. How are you doing
How
today?
are you? Good. How
I'm
are
doing
you?
good. Doing good. We're talking on top of each other there.
I
But
know.
yeah,
We're
I'm
just so
doing really well.
excited. Good.
Yeah, it's good to return to the show. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know. I was so excited that you had a good enough experience the first time that you agreed to come back a second time.
It's a little bit like therapy, getting to talk about your issues with people that are open to listening and hearing your stories. So
Yeah, I really do think even when we tell our own stories, or a lot of our guests always say like, oh, that felt really good. Like, just like get it off your chest, send it into the universe, and just know that there's probably a ton of people that can relate and got something out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked to you back in October, our episode 83, Living with Cystic Fibrosis. And that was a great episode. And we've gotten such great feedback from people that either have CF or didn't know about it and got to learn a bunch about it. And then we had mentioned in that episode that we wanted to talk to you about international adoption, infertility, and your journey through that, because that's been a ride for you.
Yeah, so one of the side effects of CF is difficulty getting pregnant or infertility. It mostly actually affects CF males because they act like 95% or something like that actually can't have children naturally. There's like
Oh my
ways that
God.
they can do it with intervention. And then a lot of females also struggle pretty significantly with that. So I already knew going into trying to get pregnant that it could be something that wasn't super easy, but I was fairly healthy and my doctor team supported me trying to get pregnant, which was great. And we also, my ex husband and I visited a geneticist to make sure that we would have, most likely a healthy baby. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but because he doesn't carry the CF gene, there was like a 0.01 chance the child could have CF.
Wow.
Yeah, we entered the journey of trying to naturally conceive. And I will say that nobody signs up for not being able to get pregnant. It's
Ah.
kind of awful. And
Yeah, even when you know that the chances are less, it still must be,
yeah,
you still have the anticipation, the hope.
yeah. And I had like a really healthy reproductive cycle, and there was really no reason I shouldn't have been able to get pregnant. And I actually did get pregnant for sure at least once, I think a couple other times, but unfortunately miscarried fairly early on. And so it's a
Oh,
heartbreaking journey that we went through for 3 years. It really tests a marriage hugely, but it
yeah,
also tests, I think, any woman that I've talked to that goes through it. You just sort of question your womanhood because it's like, this is something at the bare basic minimum that women quote unquote should be able to do. And I respect that there's so many women that don't want to do that and some women that don't want to do that that get pregnant. And, it's
yeah,
just such a spectrum. But yeah, when you're desperately wanting a child and then it doesn't pan out for you. So after about 3 years, we had tried lots of stuff. And of course, for about 2 years of the process, I was on and off hormones, which is just another level of hell that,
oh God,
is just not fun to deal with and like causes significant depression. And you just like start to not become yourself in the infertility journey. And it sucks because it's supposed to be this exciting process and it just becomes sort of dreadful. So
yeah,
I finally looked at my ex husband and said, I can't do this like for one more day. Would you consider adoption? Because the goal is that I want to be a mom,
right,
and I would love to parent somebody else's baby that maybe they aren't able to do that for them. So he took a while to come around to the idea. He wasn't sure that he could love a child that wasn't biologically his, which created a little bit of marital crisis. But we did come to the point where we agreed that we wanted to build our family through adoption. So we went to some adoption seminars and discovered that one of the things with international adoption is they tell you to choose, like if you're wanting to adopt interracially, that you would look at a country where you are happy to integrate that culture into your life.
okay,
And so we chose to adopt from New Orleans in the States. It was about a year after Hurricane Katrina, and there was a bit of a crisis with babies that were needing to find homes. And it's actually like such a sad process. And I'm actually going through a process of deconstructing the whole adoption process, especially interracially. But we can talk about that a little bit later. That it's just like really sad that instead of white people going in and adopting these babies, that we're not actually providing support for birth mothers to
right,
parent their children. But I'll get into that a little bit later.
yeah,
But we called the agency in New Orleans. The people that worked there were just like angels from heaven, like just such beautiful people, so beautiful to the birth moms and their journeys, and it just seemed like a really lovely process. So they told us it would be 6 to 12 months to get a match, and we sent down our profile, and you put together a scrapbook of like photos and the kinds of dreams that you have as a parent, and the process to apply to, like, you do what's called a home study for months, and that's like a part-time job filling out paperwork, and you literally have to answer all the questions, like how would you discipline, how would you decide what the rules are, who can change the rules, what's the role between the different parents, and like you really have to think
Wow.
through absolutely everything, which is a great exercise that all parents should do before
I
having a
was just
child.
thinking, like, that should just be the process you do before ever having a child.
It's true, because there's just
Yeah.
so many things you don't think about with parenting that come up. And so, yeah, we sent it down, and 2 weeks later, we got a call that we had a match, and that this was mid July, and that she was due at the end of August. And we were kind of like, oh
Oh
my
my
gosh, like
god.
we don't have a crib, we don't have anything. But we're like, okay, well, we've got about 6 weeks. So we will, start getting that process set up. Ryan, my ex-husband, had just started a brand new job. So he was like panicking because he's like, they're not going to let me go away for a week to
Yeah.
go and do this. But it turned out that Elliot, our son, was born 2 weeks later. So like the first weekend in August. And we had just like nothing ready. We hopped on a plane. It was so exciting though. We went down to New Orleans and went to Target and bought a car seat and like just some of those bare
Oh
minimums that
my
you
god.
need,
Yeah.
and a couple bottles and some onesies. I was like, I have no idea. And he was, a little bit early. So he was just tiny, like, so he didn't even fit 0 to 3 month clothing. And we had to wait a few days before we could see him because birth mom has to like sign off on the papers before you're allowed to see your baby. And then it was just like a movie, because I don't think maternity wards in Canada are like this, but down there you literally like went and saw through the glass window all the little baby, I don't know if they're not like incubators, but
Oh,
they're kind of like
yeah.
those little crib things, like all lined up with all the babies. And then there was like his little one, and the nurse like rolled him up to the glass and changed his little diaper. And it was just so surreal to be like, well, that's my son now.
And did you meet the birth mom?
Yeah, so we had talked to her a couple times on the phone, and then we got to meet her a couple times before we'd ever seen Elliot. And so it was extremely emotional for me because I felt like I was getting this beautiful gift out of the suffering of someone else. And I knew it was just
Yes.
heartbreaking for her, but it was her fifth child, age 5 and under. And
Oh,
she was working
wow.
part-time at Wendy's and just didn't have the means to parent another child. So it was very heartbreaking, and it felt quite unfair for me to
Yeah.
be taking this child. And of course, you just make all the promises in the world that you can, that you will give him the life that she would want for him, but it's a very bittersweet experience. And I bawled the night before we went to get him from the hospital because I just felt kind of like evil that I was getting this child out of the grief of another. And so, yeah, it took me quite a while to sort of reconcile that. But we have kept in touch with birth mom, not as much in the last few years, just sort of naturally. We have each other's numbers, we can contact each other. But I think just as he's gotten older, because he's almost 16 now, it just sort of naturally faded, but it's there if either of them want it. So yeah, we brought him home on the plane. He was a week old, just like absolutely tiny. They made an announcement on the plane that we were bringing home our son, and everybody cheered. It was just
Oh,
like really special.
nice.
It was, and it was one of the best moments of my life, coming through the customs gate at the Calgary airport, and all of our family was there. We were all crying and looking at this tiny little boy. So it was really, really special bringing him home. And then a few years later, we decided we were ready to jump into the process again. And this time we chose to actually go through our child and family services in Calgary. So we did a public adoption this time. So that's a really different process. And we were again told it would take years. And then we got a match like 4 months later. and adopted little Emmy, who was 8 months old at the time. And she had already been in 4 different homes and lots of like trauma in the womb and then like
Oh
attachment stuff,
no.
after being born, because she was placed with birth grandma, who was a refugee from Sudan and had a lot of trauma herself and just wasn't able to healthily parent. In Calgary, Child and Family Services did provide a ton of support to try to foster and keep that placement. But unfortunately, birth grandma just like wasn't prepared. And Emmy's birth mom had like very significant mental health issues and just would not have been able to care for her. So
Right.
yeah, so then we
And so when you go through the Child and Family Services, it's not like you get picked by the birth mom. It's like
correct.
this child is available and requires a home.
Yeah.
Do you want it?
Exactly.
Do you
So
want
it's
them? I
pretty
shouldn't say it.
rare that you don't actually start by fostering, but because they just did not have a viable placement for them, and actually the Sudanese community of Calgary did actually protest Emmy's removal from the home.
Oh,
So CFS tried to find another Sudanese family in Calgary that would take her, but they proposed no other options. So, fair enough. And I think the only reason that they placed her with us is because we had another Black child, because they didn't want her to be sort of the only one and not have some of that cultural support. I think they were like really struggling with how to find her, the most supportive home for her culture and
right.
the most likely mental health stuff that she would come across in her lifetime.
So she had how many homes in 8 months?
She had 4 homes. So initially they put her into foster care till they could find a family placement. They kept her in the family placement for, I want to say, 4 or 5 months, but just like wasn't working. So when she
Yeah.
got to her 3rd foster home, she was severely underweight, had no muscle development, just like wasn't being properly cared for and fed and whatnot. So
Right.
yeah, it was just there's too many barriers there, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
it's just so much trauma. I have zero blame or anger, anything, because I just think when you heard birth mom and birth grandma's story of just like the absolute horrors they faced in their life, it just, it's just, I
Yeah.
can't believe people survive what they went
Yeah.
through. So I was, honored to be able to do what I could to parent Emmy in the best way possible and give her the best life that I possibly could. So then, as Elliot was growing, he had a lot of behavioral issues. He was very aggressive, violent, and yeah, there was just like a lot of stuff going on for him. And we were getting specialists and psychologists and all these people to help him, but they sort of said like he has lower cognitive functioning and he has severe ADHD, like 98% combined type diagnosis, which
Wow.
creates significant anxiety and anger, and like his brain literally does not say stop when he's
Yeah.
getting angry. Like we have our frontal cortex will say, okay, you're getting angry, take a breath or go for a walk. But his just literally has no stop sign. So, even in his preschool years, he was like super violent and would kick and scream and like get so angry when we would leave a play place that he would vomit
Oh God.
everywhere because he would just be screaming so hard. And it was tough. Like I was
Yeah.
like, all I wanted was to be a mom. And then I have this little guy who's just so angry and so difficult and just really didn't feel attached to me. And we did everything right. Like they talk about skin on skin and always feeding him and always holding him as much as possible to create that attachment when you're a non-biological parent. And
Mhm.
we did everything by the book and we're reading all the books on how to create attachment with this little guy, but he just couldn't get there. And even in elementary, we got him like into supportive school classes to help with his learning disabilities and all that stuff. But I went for 2 years in upper elementary to an attachment specialist and worked with him for 2 years. And at the end, she said, I have nothing more for you. I've never seen a kiddo so resistant to attachment.
And is that from the trauma? Like, I heard a quote once that even getting adopted straight out of the womb, there's a trauma.
Yeah,
There's like a loss and a grief that happens with the
yeah,
infant.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
is that where it stemmed from, or was there other underlying issues?
Well, like our understanding is that he didn't have any exposure to drugs or alcohol in the pregnancy, but we don't. I guess you never know for sure, but I don't think he did, based on who his birth mother was. Like she was a really wonderful human, but who knows? And it doesn't mean she wasn't wonderful if she did use during pregnancy, but I do believe that he experienced significant adoption trauma, even though he was adopted at 1 week old. Yeah, I think there's just a bond that is broken there. And I think too, I've done like some work around epigenetics where the trauma of the birth parent is also passed down in the psyche of the child. So it
Yeah.
can be, just the trauma of Hurricane Katrina and being displaced and losing her home with 4 children the year before would be so much to be carrying, along with the grief of knowing that you weren't going to be able to keep your child. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many levels there. So he just struggled and struggled, and I just refused to give up. And this kid has put me through the ringer. I love him so much, but it has not been easy. There's been suspensions from school and expulsions, and
Oh,
sort of like everybody just giving up on him. But the
yeah.
two people that havened are me and his dad. And we co-parent beautifully together and have the kids every other week, which, isn't always ideal for kids, but every therapist that's ever worked with us actually said this is ideal for the kids that you have, because you each have that like respite time every other
Yes.
week to like re-enter the significant work of parenting these kiddos. So yeah, he struggles still with some of those things, but he's gotten tons of therapy, and I'm very happy to report that he has very much turned a corner in the last year and is super loving and is learning how to calm himself down. He came home the other day after being at his dad's for a week, and he's like, "Can I come into your office?" I was working. He's like, "I just wanted to let you know I love you so much,
Oh.
and I missed you this week, and can I give you a hug?" And like, it floored me because this is a kid that 2 years ago let me know how much I was hated
Oh
over ever being
God.
told I was loved. So,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Like, if you just keep going with these kids and never stop loving them, never stop believing that they can get there, and get them the right medication and doctors, it does happen, but it takes a lot, and it took a toll on both of my marriages for sure, and impacted that. And then Emmy, sweet little Emmy, we always knew she was a little bit delayed, but once she got into kindergarten, things started to really take a turn for the worse. She was always fairly happy until she got into kindergarten, and then we started to see like some signs that things weren't normative in her functioning, and we took her for psychological assessment, and they diagnosed her with autism and severe ADHD and severe intellectual disability. And we were just kind of floored because we just hadn't observed these things in her, and it was only when she would show up at school that these behaviors would come out. And so we were just like, yeah, I know she's a bit delayed, but like I had no idea about these other diagnoses. And so we
Wow.
started to again get her into specialized school programs, and we started to work with, I think she was about 8 or 9. We started to work with an autism specialist, and again worked with them for 2 years. And at the end, she said, "I don't think she has autism, because you guys are prescribing to all of these systems and processes really well, and nothing is changing." So we were kind of like, okay, what do we do now? And so we went through the process of having her tested for fetal alcohol syndrome.
Okay.
We knew she had been exposed in utero to drugs, and they have said that drugs affect a fetus not as long term as alcohol does. I don't agree with that
Interesting.
anymore, and I think
Oh,
they've got
okay.
to do some more research on that.
Yeah.
But most likely, if because her birth mom was fairly street entrenched, most likely if she's using hard drugs, there's probably alcohol involved too.
Yeah.
But you can't actually get a diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome unless the birth mom has specifically disclosed that they used alcohol during pregnancy, or you go through this intensive assessment to get that diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can't actually get the government supports in place without that diagnosis. So she, sure enough, was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, and we got tied into some support groups for that. But stuff was still getting weird. And
And
I
was
was
her
asking,
attachment different than Elliot's?
yeah, absolutely. Like right from the get go, she was always very loving, affectionate, which is so interesting because you see her start to life so much
Yeah.
significantly harder. But yeah, like right from the get go, she still is very loving and, she doesn't really question her adoption or she
Yeah.
has like that lower functioning piece, but she'll still like get mixed up and think that I birthed her. Uh,
Oh.
so we have to, when she was about 5 or 6, she's always been obsessed with Katy Perry. And when she was 5 or 6, she's like, "Oh, mommy, when I came out of your tummy," she's saying something. I was like, "Oh, honey, you have a different tummy, mommy. I didn't give birth to you." And she says, "Oh, well, was Grammy my tummy, mommy?" Like my mom was like,
Oh.
"No." And then she's like, "Oh, mommy, was it Katy Perry?" Like, no, honey, I think you two look really different, but that would be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's never really struggled with that, and I think it's a little bit of a blessing that she does have some of those delays, because it's just, I think she doesn't question or struggle with that grief in the same way that Elliot has. So we were starting to see, it was 2 years ago now, that things were getting really strange. And I was asking other FAS parents, like, do you see your kids talking to themselves or hiding in their closets, and you can't even get their attention when it's like she was just in this other world, and it was not her, because when she was a couple years before, she was engaged and she could answer questions, and she had just gotten to the point where I couldn't get through to her at all. I would literally have to prompt her to take every single bite, chew, 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 swallow. And she was losing weight, she was soiling herself, and it was just bizarre. Like it was like she had stopped functioning and was living in this other world where she was just constantly talking to someone else that wasn't in the room.
Oh, that's gotta be
And
so scary.
it was.
Oh god, that just gives me chills.
And people kept saying, the doctors are like, well, it could just be fetal alcohol syndrome. And she started breaking windows and climbing out of her window repeatedly, which was dangerous. And she
Yeah.
started a fire in her with a candle that she had snuck. And we were
Oh.
trying to hide everything, but she would just find stuff and unscrew like locks that we'd put on her window. And it was just bizarre because she was figuring
Wow.
out ways to like be super destructive.
How old is she at this point?
She was 11.
Okay.
And so it was, and just 6 months prior to this, Elliot had been hospitalized for attempting to end his life. And then this started to
Oh.
just get like really severe. And we were just like drowning. And finally, my
Yeah.
ex wife said one day, she's like, "You have got to take her to the ER. Like, this is just," because she just stood up in the middle of playing with sidewalk chalk and said, "I'm going to Florida," and just like took off down the street. And
Oh my god.
my ex had to like chase her and catch her, and we were just like, what is going on? So I was like, okay. But I was just so scared because anybody who's gone through mental health diagnoses processes knows how invalidating it is, because
Yeah.
every doctor just says, oh, it's just part of their diagnosis, or this can be normal, or and so I was always so scared to like really dig into this because it made me feel crazy. Like I
Yeah.
was being overreactive. But by the time we actually got her to the hospital that night, she was catatonic and like completely unresponsive. Psychiatrist was like, she should have been here a year ago. Like,
Oh
what is going
no.
on? And yeah, so she was hospitalized in a general workups for like every other illness that could have caused it, like if she had meningitis or
Right.
other things that hadn't been detected. But I was like, it's been going on like a steady decline for about 2 years. I don't think it's like a viral thing.
Right.
So after a week, they had determined that there wasn't like a seizure or something else that had taken place to cause this. Then they put her in the psychiatric ward. And that's when we found out that she had childhood schizophrenia, which is super
Wow.
rare. And they're very hesitant to diagnose that just because it's not something that happens regularly. And
Yeah. We interviewed a
um,
girl, Elle, who has schizophrenia, and
oh,
I think her mom and grandma had it, and they wouldn't
mm,
diagnose her until
yeah.
she was, I think, 17 or 18 because it
Yeah,
was,
exactly.
yeah.
And Emmy's birth mom had suspected schizophrenia. So we knew
Okay.
that that could be something that came up. But again, just like Elle, they just kept saying like the fetal alcohol syndrome. And I'm like, but she has this medical history. Like, why can't I get help?
Yeah.
So finally, and then again, her psychiatrist been here a year ago. Like she's in such severe psychosis that we aren't sure we can bring her back because she was feral. Like she wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
They were giving her Ativan to get her to sleep. She wouldn't sleep on that. And she was like 80 pounds because she wouldn't eat. She wouldn't like properly toilet. She was in like
Yeah.
24-hour observation, this tiny little thing, and had a 24-hour security guard in the hospital.
And was that
She
because
was
she
just
was a
so
risk to
violent.
herself and others?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
And Ryan and I visited every day. We created a schedule where we'd go every other day. So she was in the hospital for 5 months and she never had a day where family wasn't there to be
Right.
with her. But that first couple months was just brutal because I would be laying there and she would just sit and talk to herself and then all of a sudden would start screaming that there was a wolf in the room that was going to kill her and be like clinging to me for like dear life, like the fear and that screaming like like she was actually going to die.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she would be like, I'm the wolf and start attacking me, thinking
Oh.
I'm the person that's going to hurt her. And the security guard would have to pull her off of me and then like restrain her. Like watching your baby, who like this is not her, go
Yeah.
through that was just so traumatic and so heartbreaking to see that your child literally thinks they're going to die and you're just doing everything you can to protect them. And at the
And that's
time she was
scary
just
because, like, that's her truth, right? That is
yeah,
actually her reality, is that,
100%.
so it's not just like a kid who thinks there's a monster in their closet. It's like this is the real thing that she's living through.
Yeah, and she was
Ugh.
talking to people, like looking like there was somebody in the room and telling me what they looked like and what they would say. And they would say awful things to her, like she's ugly and she's awful and she's mean and she's wicked. And
Ugh.
they would tell her to do these messed up things. And that's like what we had found out after with like her behaviors at home is these voices were telling her to do this stuff. And it's just such a heartbreaking thing to like think like living in that reality would be awful. Like I just
Yeah.
for any folks out there living with schizophrenia, like I have so much compassion because
Yeah,
it's
even, yeah, in
horrible.
thinking back to the interview with Elle, like she would say, hers, she hears her family's voices and they call her name, and she
Yeah.
has to go through a checklist, like she's medicated, and she has to go through
Mhm.
a checklist like, okay, I know I'm home alone. I know that my dad probably isn't downstairs calling for me, but
Mhm.
you have to just constantly check your reality,
Yeah.
and that's got to
Yeah.
just be exhausting.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so when the doctor said they don't know if they can get her back from this state of psychosis, why not? Like, I guess, what is the process with schizophrenia where if you catch it, you can pull them out of it? Is it like cyclical where they come in and out of it?
I guess
Yeah.
that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think like they said that she's like in full blown psychosis. So it's like
Okay.
there isn't a cycle when you get to that point. So it's like
Right.
basically, is the medication actually going to impact her at all at this point?
Wow.
Because she was just like so far down the rabbit hole. So thankful that we tried several different medications and finally found one that worked for her, but it takes 6 weeks for every single different medication to actually start working. So
Yeah.
it takes just so long to figure out, like, the first one. It's like, okay, it's doing okay, but she still has a lot of breakthrough symptoms. Let's try a different one. And then you have to take her off of it.
Right.
She regresses and then like go back onto another one. And it's just so
Oh,
sad to watch. And one of them was
yeah.
giving her really bad tremors, and she would just start crying because she couldn't like color or do Lego because her body was shaking so badly. Like, it's
Oh,
just
and
like,
she's just little. Like
oh
11
yeah.
is so young.
Especially because, like, with her cognitive abilities too, like, she's really mentally about 4 and always
Oh,
will be.
wow. Yeah.
So it's just like you can't even really explain it to her because she's still in that preschool mind frame.
Yeah.
So yes, but finally we did find a med that has been amazing for her, and she has such an amazing team, and she did come home after 5 months and is like a lovely new little happy Emmy who, still struggles with her symptoms, and she will still get frustrated because she always hears voices. Like, she'll just be like, the voices, but they're
Oh,
mumbly. So it's just like
right.
somebody's constantly mumbling in the background.
Oh,
But,
that
and
would
then we
make me
just have
so
to,
frustrated.
yeah. Can you imagine just always hearing people mumbling in the
Yeah.
background?
Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, we did find a med that has been amazing for her, and she has such an amazing team. And she did come home after 5 months and is like a lovely new little happy Emmy who, still struggles with her symptoms, and she will still get frustrated because she always hears voices. Like, she'll just be like, the voices, but they're like
Right.
somebody's constantly mumbling in the background.
Oh,
But,
that
and
would
then we
make me
just have
so
to,
frustrated.
yeah, always hearing people mumbling in the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly. She's just like, all of a sudden, I'll be like, shut up. And you're like, oh,
Oh.
okay.
Yeah.
And if the voices get clear and she can understand them, then we know we need to adjust her meds. So it's
Right.
something that she, even with her lower cognitive functioning, is getting, like, she's able to manage it and let us know if things are getting to a point where she knows it's like unhealthy or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a journey. And it's still it's just constant work
Yeah.
parenting both of my kiddos and keeping them well and healthy and noticing if things are sort of regressing. She still struggles a little bit with toileting with everything.
Yeah.
Almost 13, and she's in a female body, and yet, needs help with pull-ups. And it's just like
Yeah.
it's a hard place to parent for sure. But we have her in an incredible school in Calgary that is so good to her, and she just loves
Oh.
going to school every day, and she's so happy. Like, yesterday morning I woke her up and she came down for her bowl of cereal and just said, I love life, mommy. And,
Oh my God.
it's so sweet. And it's so different. And she lets me know every day how much she loves me and how thankful she is that I'm her mom. And she's just so incredibly
Oh.
affectionate and kind. And, it's like having my child back
Yeah.
after losing her for a few years there. I'm incredibly grateful. And my son is, again, getting to a point where he's learning. I mean, we still get holes in the walls and we
Yeah.
still have moments where I'm like, you need to go for a walk or I'm going to have to call the police because he's bigger than me
Wow.
now. And,
Yeah.
things can get very intense. But that's few and far between compared to that being a daily concern of like, what am
Yeah.
I going to say today that's going to set him off and send him into a violent frenzy where I'm going to have to lock Emmy and the dogs and myself into my bedroom and like bar the door. So
Yeah.
I have learned so much from them and so much about patience and persistence and the power of not giving up on your
Yeah.
kids. Even when there were times like when Emmy first went into the hospital, it was complete and utter relief
Right.
because I was afraid of her and I
Yeah.
had no love from her, no affection. It was like caring for a feral child. Like,
Yeah.
she didn't connect with you ever. And she would literally sit in her closet or under her bed in the dark and watch her tablet for hours. And that's the only thing that would keep her quiet and regulated. And it was awful because I was like, I don't want to
Yeah.
be that parent that just
Yeah.
lets their kids sit on electronics. But otherwise, she would be, again, violent with me, and she would fight me and call me all sorts of names that I can't say on this podcast.
Yeah.
And it's coming from like this little kid, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
You know, when you're a parent, you just want the best for your kid and you want the best life for them, whatever that looks like for their capabilities. And to see them suffering like that is just sounds heartbreaking.
It is. And you get to a point where you also just, we did have conversations before Emmy was hospitalized and diagnosed of like, can we continue parenting her?
Right.
She's like literally removing locks from her windows and climbing out a second story window. And we're like
Oh,
just catching her in time. Like we can't keep her safe anymore.
yeah.
And you're starting to go down that road of what it looks like to get her into like a group home. And in Calgary, at least, we were talking to her social worker, and she's like, well, if you go down that road, you actually have to give up custody to child and family
Oh,
services. And it's like, so that's our choice, is to like literally give up our child, like give her back to the system. How do you make that decision for your
yeah.
baby? Like,
Yeah.
especially when she was not always like this. Like, I think it would have been a different conversation had it always been like that. But I was like,
Right.
no, I know she was such a happy, gentle, like, she is just so happy to come along on errands and do whatever I'm doing as long as she's with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's who she was as a preschooler and early elementary kid. Like, this is not my child. Where has she gone, and why can't somebody help me find her again?
Ye
But yeah, like having those conversations is just awful. Like when you have to say, I can't parent anymore. And I know that there's so many parents out there that have had to make a decision like that. And I
yeah.
do not fault them for a second, because I
Yeah.
know the toll it takes on your mental health, and you can't sleep, and you're afraid all the time of your child. And
Yeah.
like even my parents and Ryan's parents, who have been massively supportive, and we've had many people in the community that have been super supportive. When Emmy was in the hospital, we had wonderful friends bringing us meals and letting us cry and just talk through things. And I'm so grateful for my community. But I know both sets of grandparents were just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
because none of our kids were like this. Nobody knows how to help. And even
Yeah.
you go to the doctor and the pediatrician, and they're just like, well, maybe try this tactic of like behavior correction. And it's like,
Oh,
this goes so far beyond
yeah.
correcting a behavior. Like,
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do as a parent. And it's not like I was given super parenting skills,
Yeah, like, that's
like,
just it, like, you're just a human who
yeah.
wanted to be a parent and you're doing your best, but, that's really hard. Can you talk a little bit about this deconstruction? So, I think somehow I've ended up on adoption TikTok, and
Me too.
yeah,
Which has
and
helped with this process.
yeah, it's really interesting because, like, I
Yeah.
always I used to follow somebody on YouTube, I can't think of who they are, but they adopted a bunch of kids, and,
Mhm.
they always said adoption is the result of a trauma and a loss, and, as
Mhm.
happy as it is and as much as it, builds your family, there's such a sadness in it because it means,
Mhm.
a child and parent are losing each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, honestly, adoption TikTok is what got me on this journey and started to think. I knew,
Wow.
like, when I was starting to work towards sort of anti-racism and building my allyship greater. And I've always been like tuned into that as much as I could be, given that I have two Black children, and wanted to always be the best representative and best ally for my kids and understand anything that comes up for them. I started to realize that in a lot of people, adopting other races is really a form of colonization, thinking we can do better.
Right.
And in reality, sometimes we do have more resources for sure. And I know a
But
big
that's a
part.
problem in itself, like, the fact that
Exactly.
as a white person you have
Exactly.
more access to resources.
A
Ugh,
hundred
yeah.
percent. And one of the huge reasons that Elliot's birth mom chose our family is because we were in Canada, and she knew, like, it's so interesting going down to New Orleans. We ended up staying in our hotel room more because people would yell out across the street. Like, it felt like you were a celebrity because Black people would be like, whose baby is that? And why do you have that Black baby?
Oh,
And then when we'd say, oh, we're from Canada and we've adopted him, they give us a hug and be like, you have no idea. It's my dream to be in Canada where they don't have the same issues with racism. Now,
yeah. It's not
obviously, that's
great. It's
not
not
completely
perfect.
true.
Yeah.
And we certainly have major issues with Indigenous folks in particular, but we also
Yeah.
still have lots of racism against Asian folks and Black folks. And, you know, but it's different
Yeah.
because down there, when you are born Black, out of that life that is projected for you is so hard. And we just heard story after story from people that would just strike up conversation of us, of like how it's like the promised land to come to Canada. And that is a
Wow.
huge reason why Elliot's birth mom chose our family. She's like, in Canada, like, you have, you know, she asked us, like, she asked us first how cold it gets. She was worried about how cold he might be. But, you know, she just said, like, he'll have opportunities to have the same education as everybody else, and he'll have the opportunity to, you know, build a career not based on his skin color.
Yeah.
And it's true, and it's sad, and it's effed up that that's a part of her decision making process. So yeah, you know, people talk a little bit about child trafficking, that
Right.
adoption is sort of a form of that too, of
Yeah.
I want a baby, I can't have one, so let me go buy one,
Yeah.
you know, and sort of that thought process as well. So I am learning about this. You know, Elliot does have access to his birth mom should he want it. And I ask very regularly, you know, if that's something he ever wants. But at this point, he doesn't. And I talk to him about, you know, I want him to have those open and honest conversations. And he is brutally honest
Yeah.
about stuff, but he's like, no, I'm happy that I have the parents that I have, and I'm happy that I live where I live, and I don't want to meet my birth mom or any of that at this point. And I, you
Yeah.
know, and that's fair. Like, he's not there yet. And I've always, both of us have always said, anytime that you want to have a email or conversation or go visit, we will make that happen for you. But
Yeah.
he's not ready. And I just want to honor that as best as I can for him. For Emmy, it's not an option until she's 18 to open her records. So it's a little different, but she doesn't really conceptualize it the way that Elliot does.
Right.
She just sort of takes everything at face value, and I am her mom and Ryan is her dad, and she's happy that way. And you know, she just doesn't internalize it in the same way, which
Yeah.
is like great for her as well. We just honor both of our kids' journeys, and our questions, we're here to answer them. But I know, particularly for Elliot, that it is stuff that's inside of him and questions that he asks about
Yeah.
it. But you know,
Yeah.
you just have to be open to hearing those things, and be honest with myself and the parts that I play in systemic racism and the benefits that I have from being a white woman, and be honest at looking at those things, and hold as much space as I possibly can for my kiddos, and learn as much as I possibly can. And yeah, it's hard though. Like, I remember the first time Elliot came home and said the N word,
Oh,
and one of his little white friends introduced him to it. And I was
right.
like, oh no, he didn't. Where does this kid
Yeah.
live? And watching him process that, you know, and talking to him about why it's problematic. And of course, now he listens to rap music and hip hop that uses it a lot, and you know, he doesn't see it as being problematic, and we have those conversations. But I also like honor the fact that for him, if that's part of his journey, that's, you know, it is what it is. And just trying to, again, the process of discovering who he is as a Black man. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, and
Yeah.
it's a strange thing for a white person to do, is like trying to teach your kid about Blackness when you don't have that experience and you can't really speak to it. You can mostly just listen.
Yeah. And I think there's like this white savior complex that developed
Mm-hmm.
with like white people adopting people of color, children of color.
Yeah.
And you said something at the very beginning that talked about rather than adopting kids out, what are we doing within the system to
Yeah.
provide supports for the birth parents who want
Yeah.
to keep the kids? Understandably, maybe there are situations where the birth parent doesn't want to parent, and
Yes.
that's valid. But, in the situation of Elliot's mom, like, she was working part-time and already had kids, and what systems were in place for her to
Yeah.
succeed. How many kids wouldn't be placed for adoption if we instead
Absolutely.
put resources towards social services for them? And
Yeah.
i
Absolutely.
I listened to a podcast called Finding Cleo, and it's about the 60s scoop in Saskatchewan.
Cool. I gotta
And
check it out.
yeah, it's called Finding Cleo. I think it's a CBC podcast, but for anybody listening, it's about in the 60s, the Saskatchewan government had this 60s scoop where their slogan was taking the Indian out of the child. And they were going into Indigenous homes and taking children and very quickly selling them basically to white
Yeah.
families out of province, and
Yeah.
splitting up families because they wanted to make them white and live white culture. And I mean, the trauma that came from that, and so it's a story of a group of Indigenous siblings, birth siblings, and they're trying to find Cleo, who has adopted out one of their
Oh.
siblings, and the journey of trying to find her. And because all records are sealed and destroyed. And yeah, it's just, instead of, now it's like we're backtracking and we're trying to do this important work of healing. And yeah, just like pouring resources into these communities that we as white colonizers like really effed
Mm.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, like I was in my mid 20s and this was 15, almost 16 years ago. I had no idea about the intricacies of Black racism in
Yeah,
the US. And I didn't do that research and chose to adopt through New Orleans because it was one of the fastest ways to get a newborn baby
right.
and is selfish.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And our motivation sometimes for adoption isn't always, I don't know, it's hard to say because I just really wanted to be a mom and I wasn't thinking through a lot of the implications that come from that. But I'm learning now and I'm open to having those conversations, even though they're really hard.
it's not perfect. We have a long way to go, but
Mhm.
it's getting there, I hope.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I'm just curious. Emmy, like you made a point of saying she's in a woman's body, and so obviously she's got a period.
Hmm.
Is there like, could you not make the decision to intervene in that way, like a birth control, or like a, I don't know, like, because I wonder about that
Yeah.
with adults with disabilities that can't advocate for themselves or give consent in that way, medical consent.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is something that we need to work on with she's actually manages it super well. We saw when she was about 9 that she was probably going to be getting it quite soon. So we had her at the time the autism specialist wrote up a little book for her that was just so precious talking about periods and that all women have it. And so we really prepared her for when she would have that. And then we got her some special underwear. It's called Knix,
Oh yeah.
Knix, and it's like
Yeah.
period underwear, and just like provided her with resources to manage that. So she does really well with it, but we will probably work to get her an IUD that stops the period. Another one of my sleepless night things is that women with those delays are 80% chance that they will be sexually assaulted.
That's what I think about. What level of
Mhm.
consent can she give?
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
think like at this point in her life, she's never not supervised,
Right.
so it's less of a concern. But as she gets older, attempt some independence, I'm not really sure if she'll actually ever be independent. Like
Right.
our sort of future plan is that she would maybe move in with a supportive roommate or have an aide that takes her to a job and supports her with her job. But like she won't ever, because of how severe her intellectual disability is, she won't ever be like a fully functioning independent adult. And that's
Right.
totally okay. We have plans for that and are sort of thinking ahead about that, but we don't know until she's older where she'll be at. So that is absolutely a concern, is like, what if she's 2 blocks from my house, but gets stopped by someone who makes her feel happy and loved, and she cannot read secondary motives from people, like, and so, it's scary. And I teach her lots about, consent in her body and who's allowed to touch it and all of that stuff. And she's decently feisty, but you just don't know. You just don't know. And so I agree. Like, once she's moving into some more potential independence, we would definitely look at some form of birth control for her.
Yeah.
For sure. Aww. I know. So, like, it's so sad because, she's just like literally a 4 or 5-year-old dealing with these big issues. But she does them with such grace. And both of my kids, I admire their courage and the willingness to work through these things and still come out on the other end with so much love and desire to be better and to keep trying at school, even when it's so hard. They're just such amazing human beings. And I am so grateful for what they've taught me and who they are becoming. I am on the other side of what was a very dark period in my life. And I'm just so thankful for that.
My God, Amanda, thank you so much for being so honest. This is like a really hard topic because people just think like, oh, I wanted to adopt, so I got a baby and it was great.
Yeah.
But it's really intricate. And your experience, I do think that this is a real experience that people have. And even birth parents, I mean, you can birth kids that end up having mental health issues and struggles and, like, parenting is hard. I say this as a non-parent, but like, I don't know how parents do it.
You are a major support for many moms in the community. So you see it. I know that you have a strong understanding of it. So you're not totally removed from it either.
If I'm kept up at night thinking, how do I impact these young humans' lives without messing them up in today's world? And I'm not even a parent. You know what I mean? Like, I can only imagine the sleepless nights parents have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a great job for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I love talking to you, and I'm going to find a reason to have you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love repeat guests.
Yeah. And send Michelle my love and let me know if you guys need anything.
I will. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Well, this is normally the part of the outro where I say, oh my God, Amanda, thank you so much for being on our podcast again. But then Michelle and I would talk about how great the episode was. So I can only ask you, like, what do you think the episode was amazing?
Yeah, I think it was really great.
Thanks.
I think it takes like a really caring and strong person to adopt some kids. And I mean, I'm sure she's amazing.
You would have to meet her. She's honestly the greatest. Yeah, that's great. Well, I already said thank you to Amanda. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
For pouring me wine and also being my intro, outro backup, because I hadn't really planned it and I wasn't sure where Michelle was at. And then I decided, no, girl needs rest. I'm not even going to ask her.
Yeah.
Put the kids to bed, put the dogs to bed, and here we are.
Yeah, we're surrounded by
6 dogs. Yeah. 6 dogs, and the kids are asleep, and we've got wine. So I hope everybody has a really great week.
Yeah.
And I get to spend, I hope you have a great week. And
you'll be sleeping here this week.
I know. Tonight's my first night back since house sitting, so I'm excited. Okay. This is a PG podcast. Michelle, I can already tell, is rolling her eyes listening. But yeah, if you guys don't already, please follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at I Did Not Sign Up for This. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.